In this video, I'm going to teach you how to plan a Tesla road trip, and it might not be the way that you expect. Welcome everyone, my name is Zack and I make videos about electric vehicles, so if you end up enjoying this video and want to see more, make sure to like and subscribe. So the planner that's built into the Tesla navigation system is okay, but I really wouldn't recommend using it for any road trips that require more than one charging stop. It just provides very few options for customization and is limited to the conditions of right when you're using it, meaning that if you want to use it to plan a trip that's a couple weeks out, the car is going to use the current conditions such as battery level and traffic, and you really can't plan that well in advance. You also can't add waypoints in case you're planning stops along the way. The navigation system is just going to plan a straight shot from point A to point B. It also won't account for the return journey in case your final destination is pretty far from a charging location. And on top of this, it seems to just try to minimize the number of stops on road trips, which at first glance makes sense, but in reality, that results in uncomfortably low margin and doesn't seem to take into account inefficiencies such as temperature effects or carrying a lot of extra cargo with you. Overall, there are just very few ways that you can actually customize this system. So I think the best way to plan a Tesla road trip is actually to not rely on the navigation system, but instead utilize a better route planner. But that's actually what it's called. It's called a better route planner. I'm gonna go get on my computer and explain more.
Okay, so this right here is the website that I'm talking about, abetterrouteplanner.com. Now, one of the really interesting things about planning a road trip with this website is that it doesn't necessarily try to minimize the amount of charging stops you make along the way, like the Tesla navigation system does. And this is interesting because based on the way electric car batteries work, they charge fastest at a specific range of state of charge. And you can see that here in this figure for a Tesla Model 3. So on the y-axis is the power level, so this is the power output from the charger, and on the x-axis is the battery state of charge. So you can see here that if you're using a V3 Tesla supercharger that can charge up to 250 kilowatts, that you're only going to get 250 kilowatts between about 5% and 20% state of charge, and then your charging speed is going to start to taper off. And these are some rough numbers, but a good way to think about this is that to charge from about 10% battery up to about 60% battery is going to take about 20 minutes. But then it would take about 30 minutes to go from 60% all the way up to 100%. So you can see that within this region of your battery, it's just going to take a lot longer to charge compared to below that. So this starts to give you an idea that it's not super efficient to be charging your car from empty to full every time you stop at a supercharger. And that's because after about 60% state of charge, the charge rate really starts to slow down. And therefore it's actually more efficient on road trips to stop more often to charge, but only be charging up to about 60% state of charge. And obviously it depends on your route and actually having these chargers available, but if they are available, the fastest way to road trip in a Tesla is essentially to get to a supercharger as low state of charge as possible, anywhere from 5 to 10%, and then charge up just as much as you have to in order to get to the next supercharger along your route. Now, the unfortunate thing about this is that no one likes being below 10% state of charge. Alright, now that this is out of the way, let me hop back over to a better route planner. Okay, now let's step through an example of how this actually works with a better route planner. So let's say that I want to do a road trip from Denver, Colorado to Boston, Massachusetts. So you just enter your destinations up here, and then we want to go to settings. And in here, I'd recommend turning on the detailed settings. So first you want to choose which car you're driving. So you can go in here and they have all sorts of vehicles in here. So Tesla Model 3, I have a 2019, and I have the long range all-wheel drive, and I use the aero caps on my wheels. And that gives you an idea of how specific this website is, because they have every possible version of the Model 3 in here. So next up, you can set your departure state of charge. So basically whatever you're planning to have the charge at when you leave to start your journey, you put in here. I'm going to say 98%, but it might be 100. And now for reference consumption, this is based on your vehicle, so I just leave this as is. And then go down to battery and chargers. So we have fast chargers, Tesla superchargers, that's already set in there. And really what you want to pay attention to are these options right here. So the first one, the destination arrival state of charge. So this is the minimum state of charge that you're okay with arriving at your final destination with. So in this case, that would be Boston, Massachusetts. And I don't really like arriving somewhere with 10% battery and having to worry about getting a charge pretty quickly. So I'm going to put this at 20%. And then the next one is similar, but this is for arriving at chargers. And this is what we were talking about before, how the lower this number is, the faster you're going to be able to charge. But personally, 10% still seems a little low for me. So I bumped that up to 12%. And then max state of charge is really just the highest that you're willing to charge up to. I think 100% is fine for a road trip. And then battery degradation. This is really hard to know, so I just leave it at the 5% here, but I think that's likely pretty conservative. And then the other important one is charging overhead. And the description here is a little confusing, but I just think about this as how much time does it take you to get out of your car, plug in, and then unplug and drive away. It's essentially the amount of time that you're at a charger that you're not charging. And I think 5 minutes is pretty high for that. And I usually set it as 2, but I think in reality it's probably closer to 1 minute. Okay, next up let's go to the speed section. So the only things I change in here are the reference speed and the maximum speed. So reference speed is basically a percentage of the speed limit. So at 100% that means that you're always doing the speed limit. But let's face it, most people on the highway go above the speed limit. So I'm going to put this at 107%. And for example, that would mean that if the speed limit were 70 miles an hour, you would typically be driving 75 miles an hour. And next up is the maximum speed. Now 93 miles an hour seems pretty sporty to me here in the US for the highway, so I limit this to 85 miles an hour because there are some sections that have 80 mile an hour speed limits. And that means that the way this is set up right now, that if you had an 80 mile an hour speed limit, you wouldn't actually go 107% above that. It would be limited to 85. All right, next up, let's go to road conditions. Now, unfortunately, weather can affect an electric vehicle road trip quite a bit, and especially cold weather. So now that we're here in winter, I'm going to set this to 0 degrees Celsius, which is 32 degrees Fahrenheit. And you can also even set specific road conditions. You can set dry, rain or snow, or heavy rain and snow, but I'm just going to leave it at dry roads for now. Next, you can set certain things that you want to avoid on your route. For example, ferries, country borders, highways, or tolls. I have ferries and country borders set to avoid. And then the last setting is extra weight. This is really nice if you're planning to have a bunch of luggage or extra people in the car. But honestly, I haven't found that this makes a huge difference in your results. For my example, I'm just going to put in 300 pounds. Beyond that, there are just a few other settings in here that you can tweak if you like, such as the units. But let's go back and see what this actually looks like. Alright, our route has finally loaded, and you can see here that it's going to take 34 hours and 43 minutes to drive from Denver to Boston. And that's about 29 hours and 38 minutes of actual driving to go 2,030 miles, with about 5 hours and 4 minutes of charging with 19 charging stops. Now compare that to the same route that I ran in my Tesla Model 3, and you'll see that there are only 11 charging stops. And you might be thinking, wait Zach, this says 34 hours and 17 minutes, so a better route planner is actually leading to a longer trip, so why would you do that? So a few quick things about that. First off, you can see that the Tesla route had me cutting through Canada, which isn't really practical to do right now. Another thing that you can't really see here in the Tesla is that a lot of these destinations, you're going to be showing up with less than 10% battery. And I've even seen it try to route me places arriving with just 5% battery. And that's going to make for a very stressful 34 hours. And the final thing about the Tesla plan is that that really is an ideal scenario. It's not taking into account extra weight, road conditions, higher speeds, or weather. So even though a better route planner has more charging stops, you're going to get there faster and you're going to feel a lot more comfortable along the way. Now let's look at the details. So you can see that most of these stops are only 10 to 20 minutes. 10 minutes, 14, 17, 15, 14. And every once in a while there will be one that's a little longer, 27 minutes here for example. But then most of them are under 20 minutes. And if you go down here, you can click on table and it'll open up a nice table of all of this information in a super helpful format. So it's essentially just a list of every stop from the start to the finish of the trip. And for each stop, it'll tell you what state of charge you're going to arrive at, how long you're going to be there charging, and then what percentage you're going to depart at. It even calculates how much it's going to cost at the Tesla supercharger. And then over here you've got the distance in miles between the points, as well as how long it's going to take. And then you can even see the specific time of day based on what time you departed. Now, like I explained earlier, you really want to show up to the chargers with the minimum percent battery that you're comfortable with. And for this example, we set it at 12%, and you can see that in most cases, we're planned to arrive with just 12% battery. and we only stay about 15 minutes, which is long enough to get us enough charge to get to the next charger and arrive at 12% battery. Again, to utilize that faster charging sweet spot within the battery. And there's actually a lot more customization that you can do here. For example, let's go back and add another waypoint. Let's say that we want to stop in Chicago for the night on the way through. So you can just add a waypoint and then move them around in any order that you want, and then this gear will bring up a menu of settings for each waypoint. So you can set a specific departure date and time. Let's say you're going to leave there at 6 a.m. and then we can replan this. So now you can see how that stop along the way has slightly changed the plan, including some of the chargers that are going to be used. And if we open up the table, you can see the stop in Chicago right here. Another thing you can do is actually tweak your supercharging stops. Let's say, for example, that you know that you're going to stop and eat lunch or breakfast at one of these locations. And that's probably going to take longer than 14 minutes, for example. So if we click right on that stop, we can go in and customize. This page also tells you the max output of the charger, as well as gives you the option to avoid this charger if, for example, you had a bad experience there. Now, the easiest thing here is to just click this button down here for long break. And this will basically change this stop into whatever duration it takes for the car to charge to 100%. You can get more specific up here under route actions, but generally I think it's just easier to use this long break feature. And now you can see that that stop is highlighted here and it's listed at taking 47 minutes. And if you go to the table, you'll see that we're charging up to 100% battery, which also means that the next charging stop is only going to take 6 minutes. Now, once you have your route fully planned out, this table is really all that you need. Now, if you want to actually be using the times of day over here that tell you what time you'll be reaching each destination, you definitely want to go to the little gear here on your departure location. And in there, you can set the specific time of day and date that you plan to depart. But as far as this table, the easiest way to save it to reference along your trip is to go down to the Share button and then just export it to Excel. You can also share a link of the route that you've planned, or actually open the full route with all of the different waypoints of the charging locations in Google Maps, but I'm not really sure how that's going to be useful out on the road, at least in a Tesla. So if you just export it to Excel, and then it will download this spreadsheet that you can open in Excel or Google Sheets. I have it opened in Google Sheets here, and this is convenient because you can just open this from any smartphone along the route, or take a screenshot in case you're worried you won't have service. This sheet also has a link that'll open up the route that you've planned on their website in case you want to go back to that and make any tweaks. So when I'm actually on a road trip, I really just make sure that every time I stop to charge, I look at this spreadsheet to see how long I have to charge and what battery percentage I have to get up to, and then I just use the Tesla navigation system to input the next destination supercharger. Now this should be fairly accurate, but obviously there are a lot of variables. So I usually end up leaving an extra couple % battery just to make sure I don't get into a sticky situation and have to really slow down and conserve energy or anything like that. So for example, if this says I should charge up to 58%, I'll probably charge up to 60 just to be safe. And you're also going to get a good sense for how accurate your planning was by looking at what percentage you were predicted to arrive with and comparing to your actual results. I'm actually going to be driving all the way from Colorado to the Northeast shortly, and I'm going to document all of this information so I can report how accurate a better route planner was compared to my actual results. And I'll definitely be making a video talking about that.
But that's all for today. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and let me know in the comments down below if you have any questions. Regardless, thanks for watching, and see you next time.